Well, good morning, church. How you doing this morning? Good. It is so you guys aren't awake yet. You just had to brave the snow, do a little flex. You got in here. Everybody online, just know everybody in the room is doing this right now. Yep, made it. No, we're so glad that you could connect with us today as well, however you connected up with us. But what a great day. Hey, I'm going to start a little bit on a lighter note. How many of you are Office fans? We got some Office fans of The Office in the room? Okay. Yeah, a couple really big ones here. All right, so I know some of you guys watch these over and over and over, and you got these episodes memorized. But there's this one that stands out in my mind. And so Dwight brings bagels into the office one day, and he's trying to kind of solicit everybody that's there in the office. But Andy takes that act of kindness like ridiculously too far. He's so blown away that Dwight would do this that he's like, I've got to do something now to be kind or to show generosity to Dwight. And so he returns the favor. And then Dwight's like so blown away and can't be outdone by Andy. And the whole episode is these two guys going back and forth to just go, try to outdo each other in showing generosity and kindness, and in a way that only they can, right? They just play it up, and each scene just gets a little more ridiculous as each one feeds off of the other and kind of just continues to show kindness, and it's this reciprocal thing that's going on. It's a funny picture of something that we've all experienced before. Where you have a relationship with somebody where I'm going to do for you something that you will take in the right spirit, and you will then return the favor. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. It's something we've all experienced. We'll love somebody or we'll be nice to somebody because we know that there's going to be a return later connected to it. This reciprocal nature of relationships. It's the Barney song. I love you, you love me. We're a happy family, right? You know it. You've lived it, okay? So do you have that picture in your mind of reciprocal love, where you're showing it, they're showing it, you're showing it, they're showing it, and it's just this beautiful, harmonious, incredible, man, this is what life is all about. Do you have that picture in your mind? Okay, that's not at all what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a whole different version of the conversation that exists outside of that type of a reality. That reality, that reciprocal type of love and kindness shown towards each other is wonderful. It's great. It's part of what makes life fun and good and rewarding. But it's certainly not all there is to know about love and kindness and mercy and extending it to other people. And this is where we're going to go this morning in Luke chapter 6. If you're joining us today, we've been in a series for the last couple weeks where we are unpacking questions that Jesus asked in the Gospel of Luke to his followers. We're kind of studying through Luke together as a church, I guess you could say. We've got a reading plan associated with it. You can get on our app. You can go out in the lobby. You can grab one of these booklets if you haven't yet and grab it. But we're not going necessarily chapter by chapter, and it's a little bit loose chronologically, even how we're moving through it. But what we're doing is we're actually moving question for question, big question for big question through the book. Because one of Jesus' great teaching tools was questions. He would invite people to think. He would challenge you by asking you a question that you might not be able to answer in the moment, but upon reflection would lead you to take a step closer to him. That's where we're at today when we get into Luke chapter 6. Jesus is teaching, and it's referred to as the Sermon on the Plain. He's got a multitude around him. He's already asked some questions. He's already really challenged his listeners. And he's going to open up what we're about to read together by saying, for those who are listening, and then he'll go into it. And I always appreciated that he started that way. For those who are listening, like a good teacher, he knows not everybody in the room is paying attention. And sometimes even when we're not listening, it's because we're processing too much. It's fair to say that if you've been listening to Jesus unpack truth after truth after truth after truth, that you're like bombarded and you kind of take a breather. Have you ever sat in a sermon before and one phrase that was said just caught you and you just kind of went off into la la land for a while because you were just thinking about that and doing it. I had a mentor that used to say, those are the best sermons. Those are the best sermons because that's the Holy Spirit who's now starting to teach and instruct. Maybe that's why Jesus said, hey, if anybody's listening, to those who are listening, I've got some more to say. Like, hey, come back with me. Maybe he knew it's because what he was about to say was going to be really, really challenging and had the nature to have people check out. To go, oh, that's hard. That's difficult. I can't imagine that. I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to listen. But he's surrounded by a multitude of people in Luke chapter 6, early in his ministry, and he says this, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, don't demand it back. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. And here comes our question for the day. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Okay, so a couple things are going on here. He asked a big question that's going to ask us to really think. He kind of invites us into this conversation about the law of reciprocal love. He asks us, if you only love those who love you, how much credit should you actually get? Like, that's easy to do. That's human. Everybody does that. He uses the term sinners. Even sinners do that. What he's trying to say is even people who don't love God, aren't surrendered to Jesus, even everybody does that. Everybody understands the nature of I scratch your back, you scratch my back. I'll love the people who are easy to love. I'll love somebody who I think might benefit me later to be good too. He's doing a couple things here. One, he's inviting us into a conversation on the topic of love that shows a fork in the road that would go different than just normal human nature, or maybe even the culture around us. Two, he's inviting us to have a pretty honest conversation about the people that are difficult, that are in our life. And I think until you understand both of those, the rest of this teaching doesn't really, even the question itself doesn't really land. The first thing that you have to do is understand when it comes to love, he's distinguishing a brand of love that was not common, or is not easy or natural. Not just at that time, but for humans. There were 4 words in the Greek language that were used to describe love. And they all kind of had a different angle to them, a little bit of a different meaning. The first word was eros. Eros was a word that was connected to sensual, even sexual type love. You can hear our English word erotic connecting to it. Then you had philia. Philadelphia, for example, which is interesting because it's the city of brotherly love. This was the kind of love that was more like loving the lovely. Loving the lovely. Things that are just beautiful and wonderful. Those are easy to love. And then you have storge. That was the third type of love. This was like family, loyal love. Loyal love. Like because we're blood. Because we're from the same tribe, because we're from the same group, like I'm connected to you. And scientists have found that when it comes to our human nature, all those 3 types of love have an ability to do something inside our physical chemistry to cause us and propel us down the road for those types or those expressions of love, whether eros or storge or phileo. It's this oxytocin gets released in our bodies because there's this comfort, there's this like my people nature There's you're lovely, this is easy, this is natural, there's an attraction, there's something there. But what Jesus is going to press us to have a conversation about in this question is a separate kind of love than either of those three. One that exists without having to intertwine into it the understanding or some sort of expression of sexuality, disconnection from family, or even this idea that something is in and of itself lovely. He says there's a different version, a fork in the road, a conversation that we could have around a different type of love. And that word in Greek was called agape. Agape. Not a lot of conversation. It was a word that existed, but a word that did not have very clear definition in the ancient world until Jesus. This is one of the fascinating things about history, is you can look back at ancient language and you can see that this word and the understanding and use of this word took off around the time of Jesus. A word that was actually defined in the eyes of culture at large through the life and ministry of somebody. This word for love that Jesus asks about in this question is this very fourth angle or fourth type of love. It's a love of the will. It's a love that comes from the will. It's choosing to love, not because you're lovely or your family or I'm physically attracted, but because I choose to love you. I choose. Out of the goodness of my heart, I choose to love you. 1 John 3:16 shows it this way. It says, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. This is a form of love that, and the conversation on love, that we'll have no traction in if we try to understand it outside of Jesus. This is where you find its meaning. He actually defined what this kind of love is. So first of all, when we talk about the question, what good is it if you only love those who love you? Understand the type of love that we're talking about. We're talking about agape, love that comes from the will, not family, not loyal, not even physically attracted. I choose to love you. That's the conversation. The second piece of it is this. He's asking us to consider who are the people specifically that are in our lives that are very, very difficult to do that with. He identifies them as enemies. I know a lot of you might go, I don't have enemies. I don't have enemies. I mean, maybe you think of your enemy in the most like extreme sense. And you're thinking like a terrorist or something like that. And you're like, I just don't encounter those guys on a daily basis. And I think if we just only think of it in the most extreme sense, it makes this verse almost like a throwaway verse. And we know that that can't possibly be why Jesus would take extended time to teach on it if it didn't have application. I think what he's trying to get you to think about is, who are my enemies? And maybe before you just go, it's just unchristian to even think about the idea that you would have enemies, let me just help you define who that might be. I think there's a couple ways you might be able to do it. One is, who is it that it's really hard for you to pray for? Who do you not want to succeed? Who sees the world or interacts in the world so against your value system that you find it infuriating and even difficult to engage with? Maybe it's like, who is against me? Who is against me? Who is doing something to tear me down or to tear what I do down? Who is it that's difficult? Maybe this is the third way. Who is difficult to love? Who is difficult for me to love? We're deceiving ourselves if we don't think we have people in the world. Like, life is not a Barney song, is it? Life is not, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. You go, Pastor, you don't know. You don't have enemies. Are you kidding me? I absolutely do. Absolutely. There are people who want my family to fail. There are people who want this church to fail. There are people who will look at decisions that are made and criticize and potshot and try everything they can to try to divide and discourage. This just goes on. I'm not saying something new is happening. This is normal. I know when it comes to leadership if there isn't any of that, we might be too complacent and comfortable. Like there's a part of that that's just part of the journey. It's part of that. It means like we're heading somewhere. I've just had to learn and embrace there's going to be difficult people. There'll be people who will try to blow up stuff that's trying to happen in your life, in your ministry. How do you then interact with people in those ways? That's the conversation that I think Jesus is really wanting us to have. So we can have a general conversation on love, but if we want to really get specific and into the question that he asked, what credit is it to you? If you love only those who love you, what credit is that? Let's first and foremost define and talk about this in light of the most difficult, contentious, against you type of people that are in your life. Some of you just got some pictures in your mind. This just got personal. So as you have that person in your mind or persons in your mind, let me try to unpack the gist of everything that Jesus either taught or demonstrated about this word love, this agape form of love, and allow you then to apply it in your circumstances. Number one, the love that is agape love is not just something that we feel, but it's something that we do. It's something that we do. Love is often described emotionally. And there's certainly emotion to agape love. But it is not necessarily driven only by emotion. It's not just something we feel. It's not just something we think. It's something that we do, that our life, our behaviors, our hands tangibly are connected to. I have a pastor friend who has a church, and their tagline as a church is love God, love people, and do something about it. I like that. Right? Love God, love people. Everybody would go, of course, that's the mission of the church. But the third part is really important. Love God, love people, so do something with the love that you have. The love you say you have for God, let it loose in the world that you live in. Love God, love people, do something about it. Here's what I find as I just unpack that statement. I find that a lot of us like the ideal of love, but not the practice of love. Like the ideal, we're like, I'm in. And then a moment to actually live it, walk it, portray it is out in front of us, and we go, oh, that just got hard. Especially if we're applying it to everybody and specifically to those who are really, really difficult. In this passage that we read, Jesus applies a list of ways to apply this concept. He says, do good to your haters. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. That's a good start. Not only did he teach it, he modeled it. He modeled it. Later in his life, he would show love to Judas, his betrayer. He would invite Paul, his biggest, Saul was his name before that. He would invite his biggest, most vehement opposer into relationship with him. A man who literally put people to death for their faith in Jesus. He would pursue and invite him into relationship. When he was on the cross, he would say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. He's demonstrating in that it's not just something that he had in his mind or had in his heart, but he would actually demonstrate with his life. Love is not just something you feel, it's something you do. Something you do. And it's connected to your love for people. Not just your love for doing whatever it might be. Let me say it this way. When the kids were little and somebody would get sick in the middle of the night, they would come into our bedroom and they would, I don't know if it happens like this in your house, but in our house, they always went to Jamie's side of the bed. Always. And there was a clear reason for that. Because they just knew coming into the bedroom, Dad doesn't love us right now. He doesn't love us right now. Mom loves us. And so we'll go talk to Mom. Like, I would honestly, I wouldn't intend necessarily to put that vibe out. There were so many mornings that I'd wake up and I'd go, oh, the kids slept really good last night. And she would look at me with that look like, you have no idea. You have no idea. I haven't slept since 2:30 a.m. been up with 2 different kids, you're like, oh gosh, I'm sorry. And you're in trouble. But they knew. I didn't get even disturbed after a while. They tried once, maybe twice, and it was like, nope, Dad doesn't. Mom, on the other hand, is compelled to help. Okay? And sometimes it's getting up and helping somebody hold the bucket, right? You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's cleaning up the sheets and putting new ones on so that they can go back to bed. It's all kinds of things so that they can get back in there. Now, I would look at my wife and I would realize, this is to distinguish what's going on here. I never once thought, man, my wife loves getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and serving. Don't misunderstand the message. No, she doesn't love that. No one loves that. No one loves to just serve in and of itself. She loved my kids. She loved her kids. And her love for her kids compelled her in those moments of crisis to serve them tangibly. That's what Jesus is saying about this kind of love. It's not even the kind of love and service that's connected to, you know what, if I do this, they'll come back and serve me. He's like, no, this is a kind of love that the world doesn't have a good picture for. So I'm going to demonstrate it, and I'm going to invite my followers to demonstrate it. This leads me to the next teaching on this concept, and that's this, is that love is the proof of discipleship. Like if you want to know, does somebody love and follow Jesus? Do they love people? Do they love people? And that's convicting to me because sometimes when we think about, do I love Jesus? We have a thought process that goes like this. How much knowledge do I have of His Word? What's my record right now against temptation? I can't tell you how many years of my life, specifically my teenage years, that I lived and my understanding of my right standing with God was solely based on what is my present record against temptation. If it was good, I felt like God might like me right now. If it was bad, I was like, I know God hates me. What's my record against temptation? What are my leadership abilities? What is my giving record? What is my church attendance record, right? All these things that we could the proof of whether or not somebody is following Jesus or not is, are they loving like He loved? 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, whoever says he abides in Christ must walk as He walked. That's as simple as that. It's following Jesus 101. We give our will to Him. We give our life to Him. We surrender to Him. And we say, you set the bar and I will walk in that path. You set the path, I will follow behind you. I will do as you did. Remember, Jesus, the night He was betrayed, he got down and he washed His disciples' feet in the upper room. And as He got up from washing their feet, He said to them these words, I have just set an example for you that you should follow. Like I have served you, I'm calling you to serve other people. Not because you love to get down on your knees and wash people's feet, or should love to do that, but so that you could learn to love people enough that you would be willing to serve them like that. Love is the proof of discipleship. Everywhere Jesus went, He showed love to people. He saw people that nobody saw. He was people that were needy. He would reach out and connect with them. Desperate people, needy people, sometimes the smaller people and more insignificant in society. He was not inconvenienced by them. He loved them. He loved them. And He saw that His purpose in those moments was to demonstrate perfect love. Perfect love. And that's really what He's calling you and I into. And this question of what credit is it to you if you love those who love you back is designed to invite you in to a higher level of love, a love that He would demonstrate to the world ultimately by giving His life on the cross. To invite you into a conversation where you would say the greatest, the highest calling in life is to imitate God's extravagant and illogical love. Like that's the call of life. If you're trying to figure out what makes life go, or where should I point my attention, or what would be my priority in life, where do I need to aim? What would make life fulfilling? That's it. Make Jesus' highest goal, to show the world his love, your highest goal. This is a pertinent conversation for a lot of people right now. I mean, I think there's a lot of high schoolers in here. Some of you guys are graduating soon. We got some young adults. You're trying to figure out life. Where am I going? What am I going to do? What am I going to become? What's going to be important? What's going to be valuable? Where do I need to point and aim my life? What direction? What's going to bring me fulfillment? And I remember asking those questions. I remember it leading me in some part to becoming a pastor. That's the high calling. You know what I have had to learn as a pastor for 20 plus years? That one of the things that has screwed me up the most is believing that my role as a pastor is somehow important to Jesus. And that in somehow, some way, it is my highest calling, when in fact my highest calling is not anything that has a title to it. My highest calling is to love like Jesus loved. Your highest calling is to love like Jesus loved. And part of the reason, again, if I can come back to those of you who are high school, young adult, college age, part of the reason your old parents like me and older get to this midlife part and they go, I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want and I don't know, is because forever we've believed there's some other way to be satisfied, to be fulfilled. There's been a different target that we've been after in life to try to find. It's like we just keep believing these lies that there's something else that's going to make me deliriously content. And it isn't out there until we walk like Jesus walked. I say that to you young adults, teenagers, so that you could save yourself 20, 30, 40 years of heartache and disillusionment and know from the jump as you step in to life as an adult. My highest calling in life, no matter what I do, no matter what occupation I hold, is to love people and demonstrate this same kind of almost illogical love that Jesus loved. I call it illogical intentionally because you're loving people that might not necessarily love you back. It's a love that doesn't have to have anything reciprocated back at you. That's where this question is really causing us to wrestle. If you only love those who love you, what credit is that? What credit is that? What grace, that's the actual word, what grace is that? Fascinating that the word grace gets mingled into this conversation because that is the nature of our relationship, of what established it, right? That's what has established relationship with us. That's why we're called to embrace it and to walk in it. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 says, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. What I invite you to do this morning, and as we kind of wrap this conversation up, is to go ahead and put in your mind the name or names of a few people who might be pretty hard for you to love. And ask yourself, and have an open dialogue with God to go, God, how do you want me to show love to them in the near future? I say put a name and a face to it because here's what I found on this conversation about love. C.S. Lewis said it better than me. He said, I found that loving everybody in a general way may be an excuse for loving nobody in a particular way. You ever heard that? That's challenging. I talk to lots of people. If I reflect on my heart, I'd be like, no, I love everybody. That's the default posture. Love everybody, right? Love them all. But if you love everybody and never have to actually personally apply it, do you? Do you? Most people would say, I try to get along and love everybody, whether they have a relationship with God or not. Yeah, I love everybody. I know that's the right way to do life. But if you just kind of have a general approach to that conversation and not, I'm going to love, and you can name a person. And you can say, I'm committed to you. That's why in a marriage, When you stand on a stage and you pronounce that commitment to one another, what's amazing in a marriage is then when that commitment is reciprocated. But sometimes it's not. And what will happen when it's not? Will you stay and will you continue to love? When you extend love to somebody who doesn't return it back to you, will you continue to love? Will you continue? Remember, this is an act of the will. It's not required that who you are being called to love loves you back, are lovable, you are attracted to, comes natural or easy to. It's an exercise of the will. And it's a kind of love that's been demonstrated before you were ever born through the person of Jesus. When you were still his enemy, he died for you, gave his life for you, just on the chance that you might, in return, receive that love and reciprocate that love. You and I are called to that level of learning, that level of love. If you'd like to take a step towards Jesus today, to receive that love, I invite you as we sing this next song to respond. I'll be standing in the back. After service, you can come to the Connect kiosk if that's a better spot. We'd love to help you take that step. But for everybody in the room, I encourage you to follow the example that Jesus set, to heed the exhortation that Jesus gave us, to do as he did, to love as he loved, so that we could experience the way of love that he's created. Will you stand with me? Will you pray?